Welcome to the It Factor podcast. I'm here with Arun Singh. Great to have you, Arun, on the podcast today. How are you today?
Excellent. It's a beautiful summer day, so loving it.
Fantastic in Sydney today. It's actually getting quite warm, so we won't take too long in this hot podcast studio. But Arun, look, I'm looking forward to talking to you about your journey, your career journey, how you got to where you are today as CISO ANZ in ZipCo. Now, if you can share a little bit of your journey into the field of cybersecurity and IT and how you found yourself at the position you are today, some of the pivotal moments that got you there.
Sure, perfect. I started back when I was about 18, going into university, needing some money to pay for books and everything. Just fell into service desk and sort of just worked my way up from there. I moved back when I was in Australia. I moved back to New Zealand for a few years, and there we had one big project, which was a uplift of the networks for all of the New Zealand schools. And at that time, it was just, hey, cables and ones and zeros, as it always is. But after the project got delivered, we were presented, a lot of the kids from the schools came to our building and they actually showed us what those network devices, those cables and everything actually meant to them. And what it actually meant was they could connect with other classrooms around the world, learn about different cultures and expand their horizons as well.
That's really cool.
That really went, whoa. That was my whoa moment.
Your light bulb moment.
Correct. Yeah. That, hey, IT actually has a positive impact to the lives of our future generations.
Yep.
It's just not a paycheck. It's not just, hey, fixing up hardware and plugging things in. It's a lot more. That really got me embedded and built my love of IT. And then from there, just worked my way in different projects and seeing the benefits that it could have. It reignited that passion really into me.
It's fantastic. And what was next from there for you?
Sure. So after working my way in New Zealand, it was really just working into system administration, learning about what that sort of looks like, then moving into consulting. So then working in the enterprise space, so helping different businesses understand the benefit of modern user experience from endpoint devices and everything. It's not just a computer. It is the way that your employees are going to be interacting with the device, with the data. So we need to give them a good user experience as well, because if they treat it as if it's their own device, they'll look after it, they'll be happier, they'll be more productive. Perfect.
Yeah, it's almost actually about empowering
That's it.
employees as well when it comes to technology and understanding their power that they have in their hands, basically, with such a small device. Our devices are so small these days, but it's empowering our employees to know that they are actually very important when it comes to the use of our technology as well.
Correct. A few years ago, it would have been about 15 odd years ago, no one really thought about the employees or just, I have to pay money to give you a piece of hardware so you can do your job. That was it, right?
Yeah.
And we locked a lot of stuff down. It wasn't really good to use, so people didn't like using their work laptops. Now it's completely changed. Now it's one of the preferred ways of working. People use it for in their personal lives as well. How do we enable that user experience end to end, from the hardware to onboarding to access and everything? If you make a happy employee, they're more productive and they'll love actually working with our.
And we've spoken a little bit about, obviously, your tech journey, but talk me through cybersecurity and how you found yourself in the cybersecurity space.
Sure. So after working in IT consulting, I got tired of working around different companies and not seeing the end result. So you'd go design something, implement something, but you didn't see the full benefit. Correct. I had an opportunity to actually join Caltex, which is Ampol now, as a cloud architect. So got brought in to look at their cloud journey. How do we articulate it from a user experience and cost optimization point of view? Within the first year, all the goals that I had set myself and my manager had set for me, we had pretty much accomplished. And then it was, what's next? I'm starting to feel bored. I hate feeling bored. Everything for me is getting challenged, getting excited. How do I get engagement with other areas of the business as well? So I spoke to my manager at that time saying, look, I think my time at Caltex and Ampol is up. I'm going to look elsewhere because I'm bored. We actually had the cybersecurity manager at the time, Tim Strong. He's a CISO of ANZ now, lovely person. He sort of reached out and went, "Hey, are you interested in cybersecurity?" I'm like, never considered cybersecurity before. I'm like, why do you think I'm a good fit? It's like, well, you're already looking at security. You're already implementing things and designing things.
You're playing a role already.
100%.
Yeah, without even noticing in a way. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's give this a shot. So, he brought me on as a cybersecurity architect within his team. A lot more challenging and interesting projects and responsibilities within that role, especially from a business perspective and a user perspective, because now we're not just thinking about the technology, we're thinking about the human behind the technology, their experiences, and how do you protect that human, right? I think one of the common sayings is our weakest link is the human within the business.
Yeah.
I hate that saying. If they're the weakest link, what are we doing to empower them? What do we need to do to equip them with the information and the tools they need to not fall for these phishing traps and these other security incidents?
Yeah.
Right. That's our responsibility there.
It's such a good point, actually flipping that term on its head as well, because I often hear that, I have to say, with other leaders, other tech leaders that we speak to on this podcast, but also at our events as well. But it's really important to understand that we do need to empower employees. We can't just get rid of all of them, replace them with a bot or something like that. It's just not
100%.
possible. Now, we spoke a little bit about how you found yourself in cybersecurity, but what was the cybersecurity landscape like at that point? How did you view the landscape then?
It was still, I think, and it's like, it wasn't as mature as it is nowadays. I think people didn't really understand the importance of cybersecurity. Some companies, like Caltech example, they had a pretty good team building around. They sort of understood the value of data and protecting a lot of it. But a lot of the business people around the company didn't understand why we're adding friction to their workload. Why are we making things more difficult? Why are we the no fun police here?
Why are we adding more steps to these processes?
Correct.
Yeah. More guardrails that we don't want.
100%. And when I said get that same response and people say, you're the no fun police, like, really? What have I become the bad guy? No. It really made me step back and then start thinking, why is that perception there? What don't people understand about what cybersecurity is? And then sort of go into a mission to change our perceptions, right?
Yep.
We are here to protect the human, to protect the business, so you guys you're enabled to do your work productively, seamlessly, and get a really positive outcome. We don't want to make your life harder or anything, but you also don't want you to click on a link, come up with a security incident, and then you're blamed. Right. I don't like that. A couple of years ago, interesting enough, there was a incident, won't give all the details, but another third-party company had, they were supposed to pay an invoice, pretty big invoice. The admin had said, yep, we've transferred the money to the bank and everything's all good. One of the big invoices hadn't gotten paid. So the company called back and said, hey, we haven't got our repayment. What's happened? They did an internal investigation and they found that someone had manipulated the bank details for that payment. The only person that had access was this finance person, right? So what do you think happened? They got the blame.
They get blamed.
Right? They said, you're stolen the money, we're doing this. Unfortunately, that person almost had like a nervous breakdown because all this pressure, all this stuff. We sort of got bought in because when I heard about this, the company owned this other smaller company, got bought in and said, look, has anyone actually checked that it wasn't this person? Do we have evidence to support this? Got bought in, got flown out back to New Zealand to look into this. And we figured out this other company had no protections against phishing, no MFA or anything. And this poor person had gotten no training. So she used the same password as her personal credentials, which had been leaked. Someone hacked in, they got in, they modified the account details, payment went to them, and she got blamed.
And document fraud is so sophisticated now.
Yes.
You can't, the naked eye wouldn't be able to spot it.
100%.
Yeah.
So if they had these controls in place, add a little bit more friction, she would not have ended up with that nervous breakdown.
Yep.
She would have had her job. It would have still been perfect.
Yeah.
So I always use that as an example to anyone I speak to, saying, here's a real world example I've actually been through. This is what happened to this poor person, right? She can no longer work in finance because she's haunted by what happened.
This story. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a small step that she could have even taken with the education, the right education. Hey,
Correct.
Let's make sure we have the different credentials for each account. And it makes a world of difference as well. That wouldn't have happened.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting point about talking about the individual's responsibility as well, but also educating the individual. Now, I want to bring it back to your current role too and talk around being the CISO, but also the head of infrastructure operations. Now, what are your top priorities for the next 6 to 12 months, especially in this new role? Congratulations, firstly.
Thank you.
And are there any specific areas or initiatives you're planning to focus on?
There are. So we're currently working through a Gen AI strategy across the business. It's here to stay. It's something exciting. And I've been speaking to a couple of colleagues in the security space, and their first response is, how do we block this? How do we prevent this? I'm on the other side. How do we enable the secure use of AI?
This. Yeah.
What training can we give our teammates and our colleagues and our partners of how to use this securely? When is it right to use? When is it not right to use? What data can we feed it as well? And enabling the business and then showing the benefits across it, whether it be from software development, finance, data analytics, anywhere.
Yeah, and I think there is such an incredible potential with Gen AI, but as you said, you've got to do it in a way that enables teams within an environment that is safe. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep people safe. So talking about Gen AI, it sounds like you're not risk adverse. You're keen to give it a go. What are your thoughts on the kind of evolution of Gen AI from the point that you started in tech to now? It provides endless potential, really, in the way I see it. But how do you see it?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. Okay.
Right. It's a 50-50. I think
we're having a debate now. No.
At the moment, we're in the honeymoon phase, is what I'm calling it, where
hype cycle.
Correct.
Yep.
Every single company is coming out with a new AI solution.
Yeah.
Whether or not it is true AI or add benefit, and a lot of companies are scrambling. Right, they don't want to be left behind.
And they want to try the shiny new toy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's not just the businesses; the users themselves are saying, "Hey, this AI thing's cool. It can make my life easier. I want to use this and this and this," and they're just scrambling to get everything, without having a proper strategy from the business perspective of, well, what are the goals we're trying to accomplish with AI, right? How are we going to measure the success of AI, and what's the investment we're going to put into it? Yeah. It's going to fail, right? We need to put that thoughts in. Thankfully, at Zip, we've actually got some very incredibly smart people, especially in our data analytics.
That usually helps.
Data analytics teams. Even our CIO, George Gorman, he's already thinking about a lot of this. He's already empowered some of our teams. Now we're building up an AI team to start looking at these use cases, building up the business case, and then putting these structures and this governance in place where we can implement them and have a good success rate.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You've got to have that governance piece around all of this. Now, I mentioned challenges, but I would love to reflect on your previous role at Ampol, as you said, and some of your other previous roles. What were the significant challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them? And maybe there might be some lessons learned for others listening.
I think the biggest thing early on in my career, I was very technical. I focused on technical excellence. And from a technical point of view, I think I did really well. The biggest takeaway I take now looking back is the mistake I made really was not focusing on the soft skills, not focusing on the business acumen. So, I say this to my team, you can be the Albert Einstein of cybersecurity, IT, or whatever, but if you can't influence the business, you can't sell your ideas to the business of why this is a benefit, how is it going to help them and enable them, your ideas are never going to be used, right? Humans are incredibly smart in finding ways to bypass security controls, even smarter than hackers and malicious threat actors, right? So I use their feedback to build our security controls of, hey, did you bypass this and so forth. So I think focusing on the technical, but balancing it with the business acumen, the soft skills to sell those ideas is critical. Being able to understand the perspective of the person in front of you, of why are they having a challenge with this control? Where can we find that right balance? We can't just say, no, we're the security team, you do what we tell you.
Yep.
That will never work.
Yeah.
That's not a good place to work. That's not somewhere I want to work. So how can we be partners? How can we collaborate and find the right balance there?
It is, really around that communication piece with stakeholders, but also you've got employees underneath you, but then you've got to be able to communicate with the C-suite, the board. So, I mean, what sort of strategies have you found really useful with communicating, especially with the board and the powers that be and everyone above you?
Honesty.
Yeah.
Be honest, be transparent. Focus on the good, but don't neglect what's bad, right? So our CIO tells this, where we focus people's attention on the night sky and a small portion of it, which is beautiful, it's wonderful, but we're not giving them the full picture of the entire night sky. There might be some fires over here that we need to work out. And if we don't do that, they're not going to help support the things that we need, whether it's budget, resourcing, advice, guidance, because the board, they're well versed in business and everything else, right? They've seen cybersecurity across multiple companies. So maybe they've got some ideas that we can also leverage.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate the value that they add. It is not just the checkbox exercise of, here's my metrics, we're all done.
Yeah.
It's telling them what is good, what is bad. Do you have a plan? What support do you need? Be open, be transparent. And that way we avoid the whole blame game.
Totally. And we just don't want that story, as you mentioned. It just sounds like everyone's worst nightmare. You just don't want to have that happen. But at the end of the day, I know we often hear it as well, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it comes to cyber attacks. And I guess, how has that changed your perspective when you hear a term like that? How do you prepare for something that is inevitable in a way?
This is when it keeps you on your toes. And this is what I find most fun about cybersecurity, right? So I almost see it like you're in the NBA finals, right? It's you and maybe 3-4 other amateur basketball players against the Harlem Globetrotters or Team USA, the best of the best, right? They just need to score one more basket and they win. You need to block every single shot, every single time. So you have to always push yourself to be better. You need to try to anticipate where the threats can be.
Yes.
And ultimately, it comes down to risk management, right? You're not going to be able to stop all the goals. It's understanding where are the risks, where do you focus your attention to, and where are those areas where you need to do a bit of a risk acceptance. Is the risk low enough? Is it within tolerance? If that risk gets compromised, what's the worst case scenario here?
Yeah, and I think as well, I hosted a roundtable discussion where the idea of cyber resilience was also discussed, where what do you do when an attack does happen, and then how do you recover, and then the time periods of recovery as well. And I mean, in the particular research we spoke about, there was like that almost gap in expectation of the actual recovery times. So the C-suite or the board expected to be recovered within 12 hours. And you're thinking, actually, it's going to be more like 3 weeks that we're properly back up and running. But in the fintech landscape, you kind of need to be working straight away to be servicing your customers. So
Correct.
How does it work in such a unique industry like the fintech industry?
It actually works the same as any other industry, right? It all comes down to having your recovery time objectives, your recovery point objectives, so RTO, RPO, getting the business and the stakeholders to articulate how much downtime for this service can we sustain? How quickly do we need to recover it? So if they say that the recovery time objective is 24 hours, perfect. We have 24 hours to be able to recover that service. Typically it's more 4 hours, but the lower the time, the cost can go up, the complexity goes up. So we need to be very clear on that. And the recovery point objective, so the RPO, how much data can we really lose before we have a negative impact. Now, in the fintech space, it's pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
So we always have to look at, well, are we sending the data to two places? If one gets compromised, we've got another set. Let's look at the integrity of the data. When we take backups of the data. Now, backups are important, but I guarantee most organizations today take backups. They don't test the backups. We actually had this recently where a father at my daughter's school, he runs a medical practice, and he was asking me about cybersecurity. And I said, yeah, you should do backups. And he said, yeah, we have another third-party company that does backups. It's all good. I'm like, have you tested it? He's like, oh, I don't know. I'll go find out. A couple of months later, we caught up again at another birthday party, and he told me, hey, we got breached. And I was like, oh, okay, what happened? Took me through it. I'm like, oh, cool, you had backups. You told me this last time. Did you recover? He's like, yeah, none of the backups worked. I know you told me to check. I forgot to check with the company whether they test the backups. And then I completely forgot. This happened. We try to recover. That's 5 years worth of data we cannot recover now. I'm like,
Wow.
that is big implications.
Yes.
Like, yes, now it's costing us a lot more to bring in these consultancies in place to unpick the mess that's there.
And that's the thing. I think when you're working with third-party vendors, you really have to understand their obligations, their contractual obligations. You have to make sure you really know what they're offering you, their abilities. It's understanding that, because otherwise, if you don't know and you don't check, something like that can happen. We spoke about fintech as well, and obviously exciting working at ZipCo and the potential of fintech. But what excites you the most about the fintech industry at the moment?
Actually, a lot. There's a lot that we're doing within Zip, where we're trying to give that freedom back to people to control their finances a bit. I remember when I first interviewed for Zip, one of the first questions I asked was, buy now, pay later. I'm hearing all this scary stuff around people getting into debt recycling and getting themselves into trouble. How do we stop that? And then if someone can't pay, what does that look like? The response I essentially got back was, we're not here to put people into trouble. We already do these credit checks to make sure that they can do it. If someone gets into trouble, we don't send them to debt collectors. We help them. Yeah. Right? We are a partner for them. We want to help them, not get them into more debt. And I'm like, oh, perfect. Yeah. That's exactly what I hear. Interesting enough, I was actually interviewing another fintech at the same time. And when I asked them a similar question, it's like, oh, we haven't thought about that. Wow. If they can't pay the debt, then we'll just send it to debt collectors. I'm like, no.
It's interesting they hadn't thought about that ethical dilemma there. Yeah, and I think that's almost vital when you're dealing with people's money.
Exactly. So instead of getting people into trouble, we had already thought through this. And this came back to our two co-founders who were already working in the banks, right? They knew that people can get themselves into trouble, so they're going to do like self-governance. They weren't required to, right? But they said, we will put these controls in place to protect people from themselves. And that actually ultimately helped, right? We're now moving into what we call next generation financial services, offering more freedom and choice to people as well. We're a bit more flexible than the traditional banks and everything else. So it's exciting. Yes. Even my mum uses Zip Pay and Zip Money at the moment. And she's like, I just tap and it works. And then I get a bill and I can just pay it when I get the
very
money.
Convenient.
And I'm like, that's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
And then the more people I meet and they realize that I work at Zip, the more feedback I'm getting. It's like, hey, we're using it as well. We had a bit of financial hardship coming up, and ZipPay just was seamless. It helped us. It got us back on our feet. Now we're telling everyone that it's awesome. I'm like, perfect. My mission and my job is accomplished. This is exactly what I want.
You mentioned seamless as well. So bringing it back to IT, how does IT play such a role in making that user experience seamless? I mean, it's vital.
It is. Yeah. It's making sure that the infrastructure and everything scales to demand, that we can keep up to the use cases, right? So when we've got the downtimes, cool, we can scale it down, the uses. But when the busy periods come, like Christmas, Boxing Day sales, Amazon Prime days, and Black Friday, and all these types of sales. We need to be able to scale up so that people can use the services when they need it, right? And it needs to just be seamless. It can't be I try to tap and try to pay something, but it failed because there was too much demand. No, it needs to be seamless. It needs to be quick. And we hold ourselves to a very high standard, right? So we treat ourselves as if we're bigger than we really are. So we get a better user experience for our users. And that is what's going to facilitate growth for
100%.
us. Right, that word of mouth, make things easier for people, and we've seen a couple of other players in the fintech space get themselves into trouble because they haven't considered a lot of this. They try to minimize costs or just try to do the bare minimum. Said, users will just take it. No, we set a very high bar for ourselves,
and that's the thing. I think people using any sort of technology like ZipCo do expect kind of the best experience as well. And coming from a millennial generation, I want things at my fingertips. I want to be able to click a button and something works. So I want that sort of experience. And I know you were talking about your kids earlier as well, about they're on iPads and they know how to use mobile phones now. They want something to be super easy. So when they're moving into getting their own bank accounts and getting old enough to have their own money, they want a really seamless user experience as well, don't they? I mean, how do your kids see technology these days? Do they see it as an enabler? They see it as everything?
It is. One thing we do in our household is when they use the technology, it's always with myself or my wife. We engage with the kids. We show them what's 100%. What is the good uses of technology? And when we do uncover the less desirable, we talk through it. We don't try to prevent it. We're just like, okay, this is what this means. This is how this is why this is happening. This is how we're going to ignore it. But yeah, to them, it just needs to be easy, seamless. I've been getting my 8-year-old, Kiara, into Minecraft. And I gave her one of my old laptops and I said, yep, we'll play on the laptop and I'll play on the computer. And the first thing she did, she tried to touch the screen. And she goes, Dad, it's not working. I looked over and went, what do you mean it's not working? Got the mouse, it's working perfectly. She goes, no, I'm touching the screen and it's not working. I went, okay, no, you're an iPad kid. Yes, I understand.
You're used to a touch screen.
So we had to then go through, teach her what was a keyboard, what was a mouse, use through all of this. But for her, she's like, why would I use a laptop when I can do everything I want on an iPad and it's just, I tap, do something, it is intuitive, it is easy, it is seamless.
Yeah.
I'm like, you've got a point.
They do have such high expectations of technology these days. And my favorite story that you told me just before we started the podcast as well was your daughter actually telling her class what you did as a job.
Yes.
And because it's interesting. Technology enables us in so many parts of our lives and we do expect a lot from a touch of a button. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. And just the way she described it to me was fantastic. I don't know if you could give me a little bit of a taste of what you were saying before we jumped into the podcast.
No, perfect. One of the things I've been trying with her is getting her into technology, right? Because she wants to be a doctor like her mum. She wants to be an artist and everything.
And you're like, no, join the dark side.
Yes. I'm like, become an engineer. Become like me. We need more girls in tech. Yeah. Right? We need this. And she goes, no, all you ever do is go blah, 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 blah. That is your job. I'm like, no. I tried to defend it, but I was like, no, you're right. And then back in kindergarten, when she had to present on what her parents do, she decided to do me, and she did it all herself. Came up to me and essentially said, "Dad, I've got my presentation, my speech together. Can you listen?" And I'm like, perfect. She did a little introduction. I love my dad. He's my hero. We play games. We do all of this. He teaches me stuff. And he works into cybersecurity. And all he ever does is say blah, 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 blah. And then after the meeting, he puts his head in his hand and just shakes his head. I'm like, no, you can't say this. We need to rewrite.
You cannot tell anyone this. That is not correct.
There's so much more I do. Like, no, you don't. All you ever do is blah, 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 blah. And I had to stop myself and say, you're right. from the outside in, that's what it looks like I do. But there's so more that goes on.
Yes. And I think kids, it's them understanding the importance of technology and to be honest, even when I started in this role at Factor, is understanding how everyone plays a role in technology being implemented as well. And I think, people, when you don't work in tech, you expect suddenly a button to work magically. But there's so much work and so many amazing departments that go into creating these incredible pieces of technology as well. And talking about Zip too, and the team that you have at Zip, talk me through how you've built that team, and then also where you guys are at now, and what the future holds for Zip too.
Sure. Yeah, no, we've actually got an incredible team now. We went through ups and downs where we actually had a team. They all found new jobs as well. Then we've rehired. I actually helped those individuals find their own other jobs, because one thing I also learned from Ronnie Altit. He was another manager of mine. He is one of the CEOs of a company called Incentra, based out of St. Leonard's. He always used to tell me a story of a train story. He will tell it perfectly. Sorry, Ronnie, I'm going to butcher this. But he always used to say, he's in the front of the train shoveling coal to get the train going forth. He will stop at different stations. People will get on, people will get off. Sometimes he needs help in the front so he can get off and have a bit of a break. So we need to always contribute. But the way he always told it was the offboarding journey is just as important as the onboarding. It's all about that. It's all about attitude. It's all about respect. I really took that to heart when he used to tell me that. So when I've built my team, yes, we need to look at the technical, right? But it's the more important thing I focus on is the attitude. It is a thought process. What things is this individual considering when they're answering this question? Are they just thinking about the problem that's in front of them and the technical solution? Or have they thought about the human factor?
Yep.
Have they thought about what the implications are? Interesting enough, for one role, we went through about 300-400 resumes. Our talent acquisition person at Zip, Hannah, fantastic person, right? I love working with her. She got sick and tired of me because she's like, you keep on rejecting everyone. Why?
She's like, I've given you 400 resumes. Right. Surely there's someone in there.
She goes, Arun, are you being too difficult? Are you is your expectation too high? And I try to explain it back to her with saying, my expectations, I think, are reasonable. I read someone's resume and I look at where they've talked about themselves, how they've sold themselves. Have they articulated how the benefits back to the business, to the humans and their colleagues? Have they credited anyone for support as well? I look at those type of keywords. When we're interviewing, I ask specific questions, and then we add little twists. How would you, here is a situation, how would you respond? Technical answer, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm like, excellent. Now you've got the CEO sitting next to you and saying, hey, if we don't fix this, if we don't do this, we're going to lose $10 million. Does your answer change? And typically, like, no, security is the most important thing. They need to wait. I'm like, okay, but what could we possibly do to bring the business back up, service our customers? Because if someone needs to use our service and the only payment method they've got at the moment, because they're in between pay, is ZipCo, and they can't buy diapers for their kids or food or something else, that is the real world impact. That is what the CEO is thinking about.
100%.
We now need to be thinking about that same thing. How do we align with that? The CEO is not thinking about, my profits and my margins and everything. They're thinking about that human.
Servicing that customer, helping that customer.
How do we now put ourselves into their shoes? How do we consider that? How do we see that end goal of that? And the team that we've really built now, sees that vision.
Yeah.
We're still working through and improving those type of things. And we share that same story across the wider business.
It really is creating that culture though, isn't it?
Correct.
Is that mutual understanding of what our end goal is, but or what our just business objectives are, what our goals are as well. But it's really hard to tell a CEO no as well. I was going to say, I can't imagine any CEO hearing from their IT leader, oh no, we're not doing that.
We're actually lucky. Our executive committee, our CEOs and everyone else are very understanding, right? The culture, as you said, it comes from the top, bottom.
Yeah.
So Zip, I love working there because the culture is great, but the culture is set at the top. Our CEO sits with everyone else. They're there, they're approachable. You can go chat to them. If you've got an idea, go speak to them as well. They'll walk around, introduce themselves, talk to different people. They don't have that air of I'm superior,
Yes.
I'm the boss. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm just another Zipster.
I'm just
Cool.
part of the
Hey,
team. I'm
that's
here to
it.
play a part. Yeah. I think that approachability makes such a difference as well. And I want to talk a little bit around risk management philosophy too, because just to kind of, as we kind of come to the end of our conversation, but you spoke a little bit around it, but how do you approach that risk management and mitigation within the organization, and how do you communicate that with everyone as well?
We do have the traditional enterprise risk management framework, big document that says, hey, here is the ratings and everything else. I think a lot of people find that difficult to interpret and understand. Like, I don't know what this actually means. The way I tell people I do it is I think of worst case scenario.
Yep.
What is the absolute worst thing that could happen if we do this process? Now, let's walk ourselves off the ledge. What controls do we have that will mitigate or minimize that risk? Let's go down, down, down. And if it makes logical sense, so essentially, does it pass the pub test? If it passes that and it makes sense, and we can then validate that, yes, these controls are effective. Yes, we're in a good spot. Cool. Now, where does this sit? Okay, it's a low risk. And then we can align that back to the enterprise risk management framework. I think talking to people, selling it to them in that approach makes it a bit easier for them to understand.
I think that step-by-step process that you touched on there is also really effective as well. And to go even more technical with this, I know you've got a strong background in IT, IL as well, and especially align processes with that. I mean, how's your experiences with these sorts of processes influence your approach to leadership, but also decision-making as well?
They do, but they don't.
Yeah.
I've worked in a couple of organizations that follow stringent ITIL processes, and it adds a lot of rigor and controls, which is good, but it adds a lot of friction. It makes things slow, and we can't react quickly. So we've adopted a lot of these type of things at ZipCo. We use an agile methodology, but what we've essentially done is gone agile methodology, ITIL, married the two, and had a little baby. So
That's fantastic. How did you achieve that though? I feel like that's a task in itself.
it is. It was ultimately understanding the way people work. Right? It goes back to the human factor. What's the ways of working for everyone within the business? What's the negative and the positive for these changes, and why do we do the things we do? So if we're making a code change, right? If we just push this out to production and it has an incident, that's not good. Yes, we can put change management in place, which we have, but traditional change management is you would log a ticket a week ahead, you'd wait for the cab, everyone comes in, they review it, there's a week delay, then a week later you can deploy it. So typically 2 weeks from when you've got the idea, you made the code change, to when you can deploy it and then actually test it in production. That doesn't work in a fintech, right? We need to be quick. We need to be fast. So what we've sort of done is we've given guidance of what are the critical changes, what are the less critical changes, but everything is reviewed, right? We have for the critical changes, we have a quick cab every week. You can log a ticket a day before, We'll review it, we'll understand what the risk is, and if it all makes logical sense, perfect, go ahead, what's the testing and everything. For the lower risk ones, we put that accountability and responsibility back on the engineers of, you should understand what your code is doing, speak to the senior person in the team, get them to review, and give that idea back to your engineering director or your engineering manager. If you're all aligned, perfect, push it through. But actually ask yourself, what's the worst case scenario that can happen? If I push this code change and all of our services go down, that customer gets impacted? No. If it is, that's a high priority. Let's go get a few more eyes on it. Because the more eyes we get, the more ideas we have, the better mitigating controls and governance we can put in place.
It's such a great point, and I love that agility ITIL baby that you've created as well. Now, I guess to finish this off, I want to talk about some of the people that might be watching or listening to the podcast today, and they're working their way up the ranks in the tech space. They might be really interested in cybersecurity, or they might have just fallen into cybersecurity like you. What would be your advice, I guess, for someone that wants to find themselves in a role, in a CISO role eventually, and how would you kind of help them along that journey?
The biggest thing I found from me was talking to people within the business, right? And I'm not just saying people in the security team. Go out, speak to people within the business, understand what do they understand what cybersecurity is. Everyone will give you a different answer. Once you can then correlate that information, then you can say, okay, this is how people perceive cybersecurity. Here's what we can possibly do. And if those ideas differ to yours, try to understand why. Because if you can align that back to your business and the rest of the people across the business, you'll be in a better spot.
Yep.
Right. One of the things I try to do even now is we've got our customer experience team, right? They're the front line to the customers. I like going, just sitting and speaking to them, understanding, hey, what would make your life easier? You're the front line, you're the face of Zip for all of our customers when they need help. What would make your life easier? They've got some very good ideas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, they might not be technical people, but they understand the challenges of the business. And they can be small challenges, but they end up having an impact across the business as well.
We've had some very good ideas where people are like, well, a customer has to call us to do something very basic. Why do they need to call us? Why can't we just have that as a self-serve? So that's a really good idea. Maybe this is where AI can come in.
Yes.
How can we get within the app, customer can ask X, Y, Z, get the answer, self-serve, perfect. Saves them time. They don't need to wait on a queue to get the answer. Perfect. They're happy. CX has less volume of work to do. They're happy. They can then get time to upskill and speak with other areas of business as well. I think that's key. Speak to different areas of business, your seniors, your juniors. Everyone has a unique take and you will learn from it.
Yeah. Fantastic perspective. Arun, thank you so much for joining us today on the In Fact podcast. It was fantastic having you.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.